Esotericism, from the Greek ESOTERIKOS, is the word for all doctrines of a secret nature. Ancient teachings that are reserved only for the initiates, and that lead to the conquest of the supreme truth.
Verum, sine mendacio certum et verissimum, quod est inferius, est sicut quod est superius, ad perpetranda miracula rei unius, sic abebis gloriam totius mundi, ideo fugiat a te omnis obscuritas, hic est totius fortitudinis fortitudo fortis, sic mundus creatus est, itaque vocatus sum Hermes Trismegistus.
Esoterikos, the secret doctrines of universal knowledge.
ESOTERIKOS.
Alchemy is the art of transforming base metals into gold. Although they were different in their approach and methods, the traditions agreed on the material and spiritual values of their quest. They believed that when a true alchemist works on matter, he is also working on himself. Indeed, this is a necessary factor in explaining and understanding the significance of the doctrine. Every successful experiment leads to an evolution of the world and of the inner consciousness. The constant quest of history shows that alchemy, with its persistence, is not an imperfect science, but instead a complex system of knowledge that is deeply rooted in man.
We know of alchemical traditions in 3 areas: China, India, and the Mediterranean countries. Generally speaking, a substance called elixir, a word made up of an Arabic adjective and a Greek term for the dust of transmutation, was credited with the ability to transform base metals into gold and to serve as a medication for the human body, a drug capable of giving long life. Over roughly 200 years, discussion led to outlining precisely the scope of what was the significance of the alchemical opus, a work that was capable in turn of creating perfection. It was with this complexity that the elixir arrived in the Latin world.
Così canta la fenice che prima si distrugge e poi rinasce dalle ceneri per risorgere più chiara. Il mistero che l'ordine custodisce nel tempo e che non vuole rivelare è soltanto una pietra, l'oxide xilis, ma della specie più pura.
There's no doubt that transmutation became, if you like, an obsession at European courts. Again, a historical background, because quite often monarchs and princes were very keen to raise monies and funds for their extravagant lifestyles and courts. Edward Kelly, who was a very famous alchemist who accompanied John Dee into Central Europe, found employment, again, with Central European princes, ostensibly producing gems and possibly gold.
Though it continues to exist, alchemy in the modern age finds it has to forgo a language of words and instead be expressed through a language of symbols. Outside the general scientific community, it becomes an occult science, in exclusive circles, but still maintains all of its original values.
È proprio questo che i signori dell'ordine nascondono. Che non vi è differenza fra grande e piccolo. Che tutto è collegato in armonia. Che ogni essere umano può realizzare la propria forza attraverso la conoscenza della natura.
At one level, it's possible to see alchemy as a form of early chemistry or proto-chemistry, but at the same time, it's possible to see alchemy as a precursor of depth psychology, as Carl Gustav Jung did and others. So in a sense, alchemy is obviously drawing on a very deep symbolical resource within human imagination, and at the same time, it's anticipating things that might well come to be in the historical process of a more practical and material nature.
This shows that alchemy is a resource of meanings, and these meanings demand explanation. That's the only way for us to understand why the images of alchemy still continue to hold such fascination for us. In addition to this, the wisdom of alchemy is related to unfilled needs and themes that are missing from our lives. That is, the perfection of matter and the eternity of time.
Il potere cerca di screditarci con parole di cui non comprende il significato. Ermetici, maghi, alchimisti. Ma noi, forme limpide della coscienza, sappiamo che un giorno inizierà una nuova età dell'oro e allora sarà noto a tutti l'ultimo segreto, il segreto senza contenuto. L'uomo è come Dio.
Is there a true history and a false history? How can we tell them apart? From the great civilizations of distant antiquity to the Middle Ages, from the time of the Renaissance to the Age of Enlightenment, and later, historical records leave out one essential character, the magus. A man able to understand and know reality through the language of symbol, a man capable of transforming the world. Progress, wars, revolutions, stability. Throughout the ages, many writers have tried to define the reasons for event, asking themselves if it was possible to interpret the course of humanity in a different way. Among the most famous cases are the alternative hypotheses in the study of Michael Bygent, the secret plan described in several novels by Umberto Eco, the intuition of poets like William Butler Yeats, the invention of magical realism by writers like Gabriela Garcia Marquez and George Luis Borges. Different ways of asking the same question: what is the nature of truth? Artists and alchemists, texts from every epoch use both of these words referring to the followers of alchemy, a clear sign of the relationship between the creation of a work of art and the attainment of the philosopher's stone. Michelangelo, Albrecht Dürer, El Greco, Rembrandt, Marcel Duchamp, Jackson Pollock. From distant times up to the present day, the image of alchemy has been a vital resource for genius and creativity. Rome 1970, the scholar and art critic Maurizio Calvesi curated a very special exhibition called Fine dell'Alchimia, the End of Alchemy. The show featured Gino de Domenicis, Yanis Kounelis and Vettor Pisani, three avant-garde artists who had close relationships with the language of symbols and mystery.
For Gino de Domenicis, a work of art was immortal. This idea was already a sort of alchemy, containing as it does all of the alchemist's vision of the world. But their possible achievement would not have been the immortality of the soul, but of the body. Gino de Domenicis left us four solutions: beauty, invisibility, immobility. And the first? He never revealed the first solution. Therefore, can we say that de Domenicis is immortal? He is immortal in the sense that for him, art was immortal. And from both the material and spiritual points of view, the creation of a work of art is destined to defeat time.
As far as I'm concerned, alchemy, initially, is not the elements of icons or illustrations, but of language. It was precisely this idea that gave me the theatrical opportunity during the exhibition, The End of Alchemy, to exhibit a pregnant woman in the gallery. To create a work of art is like having a brainwave, and this has something to do with esotericism, because to succeed in capturing an image is something rare.
Alchemy is a journey into madness. If you intend to approach it with a rational mind, you've got the wrong number. In reality, modern alchemy is psychoanalysis, and the true shaman is the psychoanalyst who explores the unconscious in search of truth.
The alchemy manuscripts of Sir Isaac Newton had been hidden for centuries by his heirs, but in 1936 they were finally auctioned. Many of them were bought by John Maynard Keynes, the renowned American economist.
The trunk held a mass of documents, all personally written by Newton, and most were on the subject of alchemy. Therefore, they were alchemical manuscripts. The date that the trunk was reopened and the manuscripts were published marks a turning point in Newton's image.
Since then, slowly and sometimes reluctantly, science has had to acknowledge a different side to Newton's personality.
Alchemical manuscripts are not meant to be accessible to everyone. They are written to be read and understood by only a select few.
We now know that the studies and the achievements of this great English genius were driven by one specific goal: to find the original and universal principle of the world, that is, the truth of God.
We advance, or at least we try to advance, towards the sun, the light, and the truth. For the men of the so-called Hermetic tradition, a tradition that deals with magic and comes to us from antiquity, the truth lies behind us.
The pebble, or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me.
It's true that scientific research has aspirations that are not in themselves scientific. For example, in modern physics, the search for simplicity is fundamental. In other words, the idea that the deeper we go inside matter, the more elementary the laws become.
The Standard Model, that is the system in physics that attempts to explain the nature of the universe, is subjected to a final test. The results of experiments using the latest innovative technology, such as particle accelerators, will give the definitive answer, positive or negative.
The Higgs boson is the missing link in the current theory of elementary particles.
The Higgs boson, the God particle dark matter symmetry breaking, just a few of the elements that might explain how matter is formed and transformed.
It's a sign of supersymmetry, a new relationship whose most interesting feature is the connection of particles with totally different characteristics.
Which is the secret that alchemy has always pursued.
Every theory has a limit, and no one can say what might be found beyond this limit.
Fulcanelli, a mysterious name that conceals the identity of the most important alchemist for centuries. He reached illumination and gained immortality when he found the secret of the Philosopher's Stone. The master disappeared around 1923.
I might add that there is an article about Eugène Cancelier in an interview which he gave to Le Figaro that is indiscreet. Cancelier is specific that Fulcanelli would have officially disappeared, which for an alchemist doesn't mean he would die, but simply disappear, in 1923. And coincidentally, that very same year, a scholar by the name of Jules Viol disappeared. Viol was a physicist whose work concentrated on solar activity. At the end of The Mystery of the Cathedrals, we find a coat of arms that Cancelier believed was the key to reveal Fulcanelli's identity. The symbol contains the letter J in the form of a seahorse's tail, and the letter V, the initials of Jules Viol. There's no doubt that Eugène Cancelier went to Spain in 1954, and on that occasion he had one last mystical encounter with his teacher. Considering that Fulcanelli was born in 1841, at the time of this meeting he must have been 113 years old.
Santuario della tradizione, della scienza e dell'arte. La cattedrale gotica non deve essere considerata un'opera unicamente dedicata alla gloria del cristianesimo, ma un vasto aggregato di idee, tendenze, fede popolare, un tutto perfetto, cui si può far riferimento senza timore se si tratta di penetrare il pensiero degli antichi in qualsiasi ambito, religioso, laico, filosofico e sociale. Un grande insegnamento che pare nessuno abbia ascoltato in questi anni di guerra assassina.
Eugène, vi saranno sempre lotte fra gli uomini.
Già, è la vostra lezione più amara.
E anche l'ultima. Sapete bene che il percorso dell'alchimista è solitario.
Non ne sono più così convinto.
Che intendete dire? Avete abbandonato la ricerca?
Maestro, dopo tanti anni di assenza tornate, il vostro aspetto non è affatto cambiato. Dovete dirmi se esiste l'immortalità.
Non posso essere io a negarlo.
Allora perché non siete intervenuto per fermare gli eventi? Avreste potuto evitare tanta sofferenza.
Guardatemi adesso. Io esisto da sempre.
Ma che cosa?
Ci sono dei cicli nella storia del mondo che devono avvenire. Io possiedo la pietra filosofale, ma so ugualmente che non posso rivelare il suo mistero fino alla fine del secolo. Prendete questo. È il mio ultimo scritto. Noi non ci vedremo più. Ma verrà un giorno in cui vi chiederò di diffonderli, e solo allora gli uomini potranno conoscere il termine di una storia millenaria. Finis gloriae munti.
End of the World's Glory was the third and last book by Fulcanelli. It was published in France in 1999. The text is a stark warning of the end of a cycle freely dominated by the decadence of Western culture.
The main point is terrestrial magnetism and the subsequent inversion of the poles, which is a perfectly natural phenomenon that occurs every time the Earth's magnetic field progressively wanes. The text also contains moral considerations. It makes reference to the fact that the world is becoming increasingly more absurd.
The gold of alchemy shows man's inclination to gain powerful knowledge whilst keeping the attitude that allows him to use it positively and not misuse it. In this way, alchemy also spreads a spiritual and religious significance. Especially, it conveys the idea that salvation concerns not so much the soul, but rather the material world.
Today, modern science is getting dangerously close to alchemy. Politics and the economy have helped it gain a covert control of people's souls. The early stages of genetic and nuclear engineering don't have that essential knowledge, without which all forms of knowledge will be inverted. It is the revelation of divine perfection. No one can aspire to possess the great secret if they do not attune their own life to their studies. By observing, be reasoning and meditating, the novice will climb the steps that lead to knowledge, the simple imitation of natural processes, and his own ability will give him the power, bravery, and the certain trust born from a strong faith will give him the confidence to dare. Finally, when he has reached his goal, the wise man will regard the worthless vanity of the world with contempt and will draw close to those who are humble. As a voiceless disciple of eternal nature, he will remain faithful to his vow of silence in goodness and in science. The adept must remain forever silent.
Finally, the adept has become a man of immortal consciousness, and therefore, in this condition, he has reached an eternal present. Thus here is the real image of immortality and eternity.
Coming next on ESOTERIKOS.
Kabbalah, the place of all in the universe.